Is it your position that you will not comply with an act of law passed by Congress?
Yes, sir. I guess based off of what you have in testimony, yes, sir.
That you would not comply?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm glad everybody hears that on the record, that the VA is going to refuse to comply with, regardless of what we actually pass here.
Mr. Friel, you're very well aware of how you answered the congressman's question.
Yes, sir.
You recognize that the position that you're taking in this room today takes the power away from the people in this country who send representatives to Washington, D.C. to become lawmakers?
I do.
That was Kevin Friel, an official from the Veterans Affairs Office, admitting that the department would not be complying with laws passed by Congress. If you've watched this channel before, I'm well aware that these departments pretty much do whatever they want anyways, and the law is just really a suggestion. But usually when these bureaucrats are in the congressional hearings, they either play the game or they at least lie. So it's pretty wild for him to sit there in a congressional hearing with members of Congress and say, yeah, that's the department's position, that whatever you pass, we're not going to comply with it. I'm surprised he didn't just dodge the question or lie like most congressional witnesses do. However, this might be the most honest exchange I've seen between a bureaucrat and members of Congress. Not that it really helps his case, but it is refreshing to hear a bureaucrat say, yeah, we just really don't care about the separation of powers. The bill they're discussing is the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act, which is aimed at preventing veterans from losing their firearms, especially in the case of assigning a fiduciary, which currently happens now, as explained here by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a Democrat from the Communist District of Florida.
When you have a veteran who has been referred to a fiduciary to take over their finances, that means that they are actually prohibited by federal law from buying or possessing a gun. And this bill carves out an exception and prevents the VA from referring a veteran who would otherwise not be able, under federal law, to purchase or possess a gun to continue to do so. And that's dangerous to the veteran.
So as you can see, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is very concerned about the veterans. That's why she wants to disarm them. Regardless of what anyone at the VA thinks about this bill, it is their job to implement the laws passed by Congress within their department. That's not how it actually works in DC, and this is a perfect example of how the bureaucrats feel about their power.
My questions are going to be about the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act and the Safeguarding Veterans Second Amendment Rights Act that Representative Crane is going to be bringing through. Would you agree with me that it's imperative that eligible veterans feel comfortable receiving health care from the VA?
I would.
Thank you very much. As taken directly from the VA's mission, the core values are integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence, known as I CARE. Okay, that's taken directly from your mission statement. Do you think referring to veterans who need a fiduciary as mentally incompetent fulfills this mission or makes veterans less likely to pursue care at the VA?
So one thing I'd like to clarify, Representative Rosendale, is that VHA does not report individuals to NICS. That is a VBA function.
So, Mr. Friel, I know the process. Okay. Stop using someone else as a scapegoat. What I'm trying to find out is, do you think that identifying veterans that request a fiduciary as mentally incompetent builds confidence in them coming to the VA and receiving health care there? When you identify them as mentally incompetent?
I do believe, because that mental incompetency decision is based
You do believe that makes them more inclined to come to VA? Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
I don't believe that it does, but if you believe that it does.
I do not believe that it sways them in any way, because the decision is based off of benefit, not off medical treatment.
I just think it's a very degrading terminology. That's what I think. And I think if we went around the table here and started talking to the veterans and said, do you feel comfortable with the Veterans Administration identifying you as mentally incompetent, that you would probably find that most of the veterans find that offensive as well. Does the terminology respect the contributions veterans have made to our country?
I believe, sir, that we could probably look at better language than mentally incompetent. But
so you would say that it does not recognize the contributions that veterans have made to our country?
I would say that's a bad comparison, sir, and that we are looking at making that decision based off of what the fiduciary program is and what.
All right, Mr. Friel, are you concerned that veterans might be less willing to seek care at the VA knowing that it could result in them unfairly losing their Second Amendment rights?
I am not, as I said before, it's seeking care is not what gets you into the fiduciary program. It's actually applying for benefits that puts you into that program.
The National Academy of Sciences found that 35% of the veterans identify, and I quote, the potential of having their personal firearms taken away as an obstacle to use VA mental health services. So if the VA won't acknowledge, and you will sit here and not acknowledge this or try to change that belief, that only leads us to believe that the VA is either trying to reduce the delivery of mental health care, because we have evidence that shows that it does reduce the confidence that veterans have in going and seeking this care. And if you won't acknowledge that, and if you want to change that, then that leads us to believe that you're either trying to reduce the amount of health care that's being delivered by the VA, or you're making this an attempt to seize firearms from the veterans. VA's testimony stated that if the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act is signed into law, and this is even more troubling, the VA could not comply because the VA states the Department of Justice, an executive branch agency, affirmed VA's interpretation of the Brady Act. So, is it the VA's position that the VA will not comply with an act of Congress based on another agency's interpretation of the law?
So the VA has always works to comply with all laws. We complied with the Brady Handgun Act when it was in effect. The law.
So again, is the VA's position, because based on the statement they could not comply with the Restoration Act, the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act, is it your position that you will not comply with an act of law passed by Congress?
Yes, sir. I guess based off of what you have in testimony, yes, sir.
That you would not comply?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm glad everybody hears that on the record, that the VA is going to refuse to comply with, regardless of what we actually pass here, including questions that Representative Self was just asking in view of the Chevron Act being passed. Mr. Chair, I have just a couple more questions, but I think that Mr. Friel has incriminated himself and the VA that they're going to have complete disregard for what we're going to do anyway. So
Mr. Friel, you're
back.
very well aware of how you just answered the congressman's question, correct?
Sir, as I said, it's in our testimony that we would have trouble complying with that law. As I said,
Mr. Friel, you're very well aware of how you answered the congressman's question.
yes, sir.
When a fiduciary decides they're going to report a veteran to NICS, do they look at any findings that a veteran is endangered to himself or others? Do they look at mental health records? Do they look at arrest records? Do they look at judicial records?
So yes, so today, when we report someone to NICS, we are following the Appropriations Act of 2024, where we are only reporting those where we have a court finding or order of potential harm to self or others. We do not actively search for those. We do rely on first-party information, or if the veteran were to have, say, a court-appointed guardian or custodian, then we would seek to see what the order is. But we are not actively investigating or doing background check on any veteran put into the fiduciary program.
Thank you. Ms. Messenger, do VA employees currently initiate or participate in any state proceedings to temporarily confiscate any veteran's firearms, even when experts on red flag laws inform us that such proceedings would provide them with no adequate opportunity to defend themselves in court?
Thank you for that question. I am going to yield to Mr. Friel.
So just so I can clarify, make sure I'm giving you, you're asking, is there anything currently where VA is pursuing those red flag laws or are participating in those? Is that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Participate in any state proceedings to temporarily confiscate any veteran's firearms.
So the VA unto itself does not confiscate firearms. It's not within our purview. However, VA police.
That's not what the question was, sir. Do VA employees currently initiate or participate in any state proceedings that go on to temporarily confiscate a veteran's firearm?
Yes, they could be ordered. They could testify. VA police or clinicians could testify in hearings where there's domestic violence, or in an area where the veteran may have to be temporarily in residence medical care. So yes, in those cases, they would participate in a hearing.
Mr. Friel, did you tell Congressman Rosendale earlier that you would not comply with laws passed by Congress that overrode the VA's interpretation of law?
So I'd like to clarify.
Please
So-
do.
So within the VA perspective, we have put in our testimony that the Secretary could not comply. I work within the VA. I work for the Secretary, so we would, as the instruction is provided to us, we would demonstrate and imply and implement as we are directed to do so
By who?
by the Secretary.
Do you see how that creates a problem, sir? Do you recognize that the position that you're taking in this room today takes the power away from the people in this country who send representatives to Washington, D.C. to become lawmakers?
I do.
So then why is that your position?
So-
Do you not care, sir, that this country was formed and founded by the people, for the people?
I do, and I have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution.
Well, then why would you take a position like that?
So as I said, I work for the Secretary, and we would follow the guidance.
Oh, so you work for the Secretary, so you would override what the people and the Constitution actually say. Is that what you're telling me, sir?
So I would be following the direction provided to me by my leadership.
Okay, so if he told you see how far down the rabbit hole we can go with that, sir?
I do, sir.
If he told you to do stuff that was unconstitutional, you'd do it? That's what you're telling us.
No, sir, I would.
Who are the lawmakers here in Washington, D.C.?
It's this body, sir.
Is it unelected bureaucrats?
No, sir.
Did the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, did he get elected by the people of the United States, or was he appointed?
He was appointed, sir.
Right. Was I elected?
Yes, sir.
Was the chairman elected?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So you see the problem.
I do, sir.
So where are your where is your loyalty, sir? Is it to the Constitution or is it to your boss?
My loyalty is to the Constitution. However,
Doesn't seem like it, Mr. Friel. Especially, and the problem is, sir, you seem like a nice guy. The problem is we're talking about veterans' rights and due process and their right to bear and keep arms, another constitutional premise. But you're willing to do what your boss tells you to do, even if it violates their rights.
and sir, we have conflicts of
You should
laws
do
also.
some soul searching, sir. You really should, on where your loyalties lie. And unfortunately, you're definitely on the wrong side of this one, constitutionally.